You get the same thrill driving a motorbike on the street in Saigon, so.
Yeah, barreling towards your death.
I think there's a lot of parallels between skiing and driving a motorbike in Vietnam, because when you're on the ski field, you're only really responsible for what's in front of you, and whatever's behind you is not your problem. It's their problem, because you're in front of them at that point. So in Vietnam, when you drive, also you don't pay attention at all to what's happening behind you. Nobody uses their mirrors. Nobody makes a conscious effort to check before they turn across the lane of traffic, because that's the problem with the people behind them.
That's why Mark's got broken ribs.
That's exactly why, yeah.
Yeah, I was never a snowboarder. I think I've tried twice. But I understand the skiing reference. Coming from the Northeast in the States, we have pretty strong winters. Skied a lot when I was younger. I was described it as driving in a sea of fish before I was in Cambodia, doing a TEFL, and everyone was telling me about Vietnam. They're like, the traffic, you got to do it. You got to rent a bike within a week or two of going there. I took a little bit longer.
Yeah, a week or two is quite.
Yeah, I didn't just dive in like that. But it's like being in a school of fish. Yeah. If you go with the school, you're going to be safe. But if you go against the school, people are going to start knocking into you because they're just going to expect you to go with the school because everyone else is.
All right, let's see if we can get good enough. Well, I'll give you a little more info on the gooeyduck.
Is this meant to be in sashimi?
Yes, but I put it in lemon. It's not. It's going to be a little more half sashimi, half ceviche, because I don't know how long ago this thing was alive. But one good sign is the chef that I learned this technique from said it should get wavy and curl up if it's fresh, and it did that. You see how it's kind of wavy?
Well, it's just squirting water out, which I think is a sign that it's
very fresh. Yeah. Right over there.
It's tasty.
Nice, right? All this stuff we just started selling yesterday, so
just nice and smooth. Doesn't make me think of bears, but
it's not a bear. Look closely at it. What is it?
It's not a bear?
So.
Oh, I'm sorry, there's a sticker over it.
Right.
It's a bear with antlers. It's a bear with antlers. Is there a name for this?
Yeah.
A beer?
Yeah.
It's a bear deer?
Yeah.
It's a beer?
Nice
Holy
job.
shit, is that a thing? Fucking yes, I got it. I didn't know that was a thing.
Well,
I like
it's not a real thing.
Oh,
It's a thing on the can.
Yeah.
It's a beer. Bear and a deer.
I think this is the tropical.
That's the lager, the Tropical Thunder, yeah.
That's very tasty.
That's good for now, I guess.
So we had a tap takeover last night, and on the way out the door, Dave, who you interviewed previously, he put a little bit of pressure on us to do a shotgun. Had 7 people do it, and we pulled 7 different beers out of the fridge. So we had up to I think a 9% double IPA, all the way down through. We had a sour. We had this one, which is incredibly effervescent, and everyone drew a number, and we had a shotgun challenge, which was very unfair for some of the people, but a lot of fun.
Cool.
And I beat Dave.
Oh, was Mark in attendance?
No.
Yeah.
Mark shotgunning beer shotgun speed is I know you've seen it.
Not human.
Yeah, it's you just open up a vacuum in your throat and it just goes away.
So, gooeyduck. This is the snout. This is not for everyone, I've been told, because of it's very chewy, like cartilage almost. But the belly, which we're gonna do after is supposed to be the delicacy of it. Yeah, you can see how the flesh is getting a little wavy. That's because the muscles are still partly alive. As I sliced it, they all convulse and it wrinkles up. That was what the master chef I was studying said would happen, and it did, so I know it's pretty fresh, but I still covered it in lemon juice just to give us a little extra safety.
So who's going first? My pleasure. Okay.
I think I see a little one with my name on it. I just put a little cracked pepper and salt on there for a little seasoning. But maybe it doesn't want to stay on the fork.
Great podcast materials, chewing. For ASMR people.
Yeah, that's me.
Quite a bit of flavor of the sea.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite mild. It's not
Texture is like
unusual.
Very mild.
I'm trying to think. Sometimes the like.
It's like a rubbery
It's a bit like hot.
Yeah, like some of the entrails, some of the.
They're very, tough muscle, but nice.
A lot of flavor comes out of it. Now I'm really interested in what the fatty part tastes like. It's probably going to be really rich. So that's the belly. The belly gets fat over 150 years of feeding on plankton, and it builds up this fatty deposit inside. So big that the clam never can shut. Yeah, that's why it's always open like that. And that makes what the natives called the ball sack part of it. That was their word, geoduck. Just looked up the meaning of the word, and it roughly translates to that native tribe as the genitalia, both parts. So
The more you know, huh?
it's the cock and balls of the sea,
Cheers.
and that's sexy meat.
I feel very sexy right now.
I wonder what them. I guess it just without the lemon zest, there's not too much flavor. Or it's not very strong, very mild.
It tasted like, when you bite into a big piece of clam and a clam chowder, that's the flavor. It's the flavor of a clam. It's just, I thought it was a lot of flavor, and that's what, just the snout part of it too. So, cool.
Yeah, thanks.
Interesting.
Not at all what I was expecting.
So
I thought
you had
were
your
gonna cook
first
up-
craft beer in my backyard,
Yeah.
and you had your first gooeyduck. Oh, did everyone get some of this?
Yeah, I tried some.
Oh, okay. Yeah, in my living room.
That's true.
All right, so we're here at Sexy Meat Tarks. God, I'm leaving that in. I deserve that. I've been doing this all day. I just came from a class teaching students English. So we're here with Tim and Mark and Josh. Tim and Mark, you guys are co-founders and co-creators at Quan, by extension Beercraft.
That's true.
Thank you very much for being with us, Tim. We've got the geoduck down early, so why don't we get into a little bit of your origins in Asia? Like what brought you to Vietnam to start with?
Yeah, okay. I came here when I was 20 years old, and I had been studying microbiology at university, and I was quite enjoying it, but after the first year, I didn't really know what the path ahead looked like, so I decided I'd take just a couple of months off and go travel. And during those couple of months, I was going to decide whether or not I continue on microbiology or I changed my major when I went back. I didn't really have any idea where I wanted to travel to, but at the time my uncle was living here. So it seemed quite convenient to just come over to Vietnam and check it out and visit my uncle. I'd read, Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain, and he writes a lot about Vietnam. So I was kind of excited to come out here and try the food. I was working in restaurants at the time. And that's kind of how I ended up here for 3 months. And after 3 months, I was having such a good time. I met a group of friends that I was really getting along with and decided to extend it to 3 more months. And then after those 3 months, I said, well, maybe 6 more months won't hurt, but I'll definitely go back after 1 year. And after 1 year, it came around and sort of thought, well, 1 more year won't hurt. And it's been a little bit like that ever since.
You're in the game.
Yeah.
You did you just feel relaxed and comfortable here?
No, absolutely not. The opposite.
Okay.
I come from a relaxed and comfortable place in Brisbane, and here was the polar opposite. It was chaotic. It was, everything was completely unexpected. Everything was mind blowing. Like,
so it was a frontier. It was you could explore, go on adventures, and
yes, yeah,
gotcha.
very much so. And I was at the age where I was, at 20, I was, very adventurous and looking for the next fun thing to do. And Vietnam, it kind of resonated. It really, it was so unpredictable and kept me guessing every day. Never knew what was going to happen, and that was really, really exciting. And it was kind of that, or go back and spend my days in lecture halls learning about physics and chemistry and biology.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not a hard decision to stay.
What were some of the early? Were there a few different events that occurred and convinced you? Because we understand, of course, in general what you mean. You just you liked the wildness out here, but there's got a couple of great stories you could share with us. I'm sure there's many that probably can't share. We all have those, but
I haven't thought about these stories for a very long time. My first trip to Cambodia with my friend Jake came after reading the book Off the Rails in Phnom Penh, and that's it's a pretty crazy book, and I thought it was going to be a little bit of an exaggeration. And when we got to Phnom Penh, it made Ho Chi Minh City look like a very, very organized and sophisticated place. So, just getting up to a lot of trouble and having a great time, that's what kind of attracted me here. I don't think I have any specific stories that I can tell right now.
Okay. So just again, I'm sure you said it earlier, but just to put a timestamp on it, what was the year you came here?
I came here in 2002, the
Around
very beginning of 2002.
Okay. And so when you were, you said you were around 20 at that time?
Yeah, I had my 21st birthday here.
Very cool. Okay. So for people who don't know, I've been to Cambodia, but in Mark, I know you've been as well. It's a little bit more of a chaotic scene even today than Phnom Penh, but it's largely because of the Khmer Rouge, and they had that country was devastated, and they've always had problems with catching up to normalcy after, what was it, 1/4 of their population was decimated? Something like that? So like 20 to 40-year-olds had extremely high chance of just being lost.
Yeah.
To put it in non-violent terms, but it was a very violent time. So like I didn't have any experiences in Cambodia until 2014. So and then it did feel very chaotic. But I think the chaos was stemming from the income divide that was beginning to occur, or was already in motion, because a lot of what I saw there was big mega structures being built, or compared to the surrounding areas. Phnom Penh has some very impoverished areas, and the Cambodians are wonderful people, very nice, but they're also very poor. And then they're next to an area where people have made houses out of things they can find, like sheet metal and scrap fabric and stuff like that, and cardboard. And next, 100 feet down the road, there might be a hotel going up, a multi-star hotel. And that's so to me. Just seemed to be a stark divide.
Yeah.
Was that going on in 2002?
Back in 2002, even the main downtown area was hardly paved. The roads were dirt roads. and it was just kind of an uneasiness to everything. I remember one night, my friend Jake and I, we went out.
Uneasiness.
Yeah, it didn't feel safe.
Oh,
right?
okay.
It felt
okay.
like.
I see what you're saying.
So one night, my friend and I, we there were a couple of guys, some motorbike taxi guys that hung out by our hotel, and they kind of approached us one day and asked us if we wanted to go anywhere, and we brushed them off by saying, maybe tomorrow we'll go to the killing fields. And we ended up going out and having a really big night. We got really drunk. I think we stumbled out of the hotel the next day at about 2:00 in the afternoon, and the two guys were waiting outside, and they looked like they'd been waiting there a long time, and they were not happy, and they were quite pissed off at us because I think they maybe came in the morning expecting to take us to the killing fields, and we kind of just blew them off. We weren't there, yeah. So, I think we felt a small amount of fear that these guys might want to do something to us, and from reading the book Off the Rails and talking to people before we came, they said, be very careful, don't go out after 8:30 at night, you'll hear gunshots and all that kind of stuff. So we were like, oh shit, we pissed these guys off and we really shouldn't have. So we did promise to them the next day that we would go to the killing fields, and we made sure we got up on time and we met them. And they turned out to be quite nice after that. But just that feeling of going around and thinking that I could go missing very easily and no one would know, there's no police presence here or anything like that. It was wild.
I still have not been there. Every time I hear these stories, usually the term Wild West comes up. Anything goes, and that was, I can imagine.
You haven't been to Phnom Penh?
I've landed at the airport on the way to Thailand, but never.
Yeah, for some reason I thought you had been.
Yeah, I've been all around Asia. That's the one country I'm missing right now.
I think by the point I was there, I didn't have that sense. But also, when I was there in the TEFL group I was in, I was also out with 15 foreigners. I feel like 60% of were men, and we weren't going out late at night. There wasn't any place really to go. We would just drink at the bar at the hotel, or in our rooms. Some of the early days in Vietnam. So did you live exclusively in Saigon? Have you lived in other parts of Vietnam?
I lived in Ho Chi Minh City for the first about 4 years. Mm-hmm. There was not the expat community that there is today. It was really, really small, and to a large extent, everybody knew everybody. So it was a lot closer and a lot more friendly, and that's why it was such a cool place to be. Everywhere I went, I'd bump into people that I knew. But through meeting people and through making connections, I got a job with one of my customers in the bar that I was working at the time, and he told me that he was building the first international standard cinema in Vietnam, and he wanted me to join him. So I did, and that cinema was called Megastar Cineplex, and I moved to Hanoi to open and run the north of Vietnam for them. And as in doing that, I ended up living in Hanoi for about 2.5, 3 years. I lived in Haiphong for nearly 1 year, back in 2006 or something.
That's a port city, right?
That was horrifying. I hated every second of my life when I was in Haiphong.
Oh, you gotta explain this. Why?
People in Haiphong are very rough.
I've heard that. Okay.
There's a lot of, because it's a port city, there's a lot of mafia there, and a lot of people try to show their power. So just some odd things, like I would be working in the cinema and some customers would come in and be loud and obnoxious and be pushing other customers out of the way. And I would go over, talk to them and say, hey, can you not do that? And I actually had people throw their entire cups of drinks in my face. I had people who threatened to wait outside and kill me when I left the cinema. Over nothing.
Just for challenging or
just for asking not to push in line
and
and
really challenging or just saying, pushing back a little bit.
Yeah, it was just really.
I had a student from Haiphong who described it as the New York of Vietnam. I don't know if you've spent any time in New York.
I've been to New York one time, but it's too long ago now.
New York is, I think what he's making the point of is there's a toughness to New Yorkers.
Yeah.
They don't take shit from anyone. They're the first city and they let everyone know it. Maybe that similarity.
I get some parallels. I don't think it's very much like New York in many other ways.
I think he was the student I had was describing
the toughness,
personality of the people.
Yeah, the willingness to just at a second's notice get into a fight.
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
I got the impression, or actually no, it wasn't even an impression. He was telling me things like that. So.
Boston is known for that too.
I'd say people in Boston are fightier, in my experience.
They're quite punchy.
Yeah. Those punchy people in Boston.
So that's up to 2006, and
then I moved to Da Nang, and then back to Hanoi. Da Nang was the loveliest place in the world.
I first met you in 2009. You came to Chicago. I'd never been to Vietnam. But by 2010, I made my first trip out here, and that's why I put the Sapporos out. I hadn't traveled internationally. I hadn't left North American continent. I'd been to Canada and Mexico, but I'd never done something like that. And I was talking with Tim, and my friend Jake was up in Da Nang, and I arrived. I told Tim I was coming on Sunday. I was there on Saturday. I completely misunderstood my itinerary. I called him like, I'm here. You're like, I thought you said Sunday. I'm like, it's not Sunday. It said plus 1 day on the ticket. I added a day, and
so just for clarification, is this the same Jake?
Yeah.
Okay. So I figured it was. It's the same Jake you went to Cambodia.
Jake, I grew up with.
It's
what connected me and Tim. Jake and Tim, strangely, arrived in Vietnam on the same day. Ended up meeting each other again at a bar later on the same day. Ended up applying for the same job. And then they ended up, hey, I need a roommate, getting their first apartment. So they were very good friends for a long time. When I met Tim, he traveled with Jake back to the U.S. But I was fast forwarding into when I first met Tim in Vietnam. It was actually Tet. It was New Year's Eve. It was right at midnight. I mean, people were all over the streets burning stuff. I'm like, what's this place is crazy at midnight? What is going on? Tim's like, we were just having a steak, and we were planning on picking you up tomorrow. And I told him where I was, and he showed up at like midnight or 1 in the morning. I think Sapporo was one of I didn't realize it, but he had grabbed, because he already knew I was quite a beer drinker and a brewer. There was like a Zorak, one of everything available. And I didn't realize it. I thought, okay, there's like a Heineken, this and that. And he said, Sapporo's probably the best beer you can get here. I think, and that's why I grabbed him for this part of the interview.
Bringing it all back again.
Yeah, that was the second time I'd met Tim. But by that point, you had become the manager of the Hard Rock Cafe, right?
Yeah.
So more F&B at the theater. The years of experience were piling up, and it wasn't even that trip that. I'll let Josh lead this because I know your story. The reason why I say it is,
okay.
But I'll tell you this, Josh. Before I met Tim, I was brewing beer in my kitchen, and I was making my barbecue in my backyard. Mm-hmm. And he can tell us a little more about the journey of how we got to this now. But
okay.
Did I set that up weird?
Shit. No, thank you. Obviously, you're tossing it to me because of my extreme expertise.
Yeah, I don't just want to.
My ability to control.
Yeah, just say
mouth.
from the perspective, I don't want to just tell my story again. I've already done that.
But because I've heard it told I've heard it told a few times. So, where I think is an interesting place to start is the first barbecue you guys had.
Sure.
Because that to me, in hearing your origin story when we sat down and talked, and on the meat book we talked a little bit about that moment, and there's two different things I'm very curious about. Music, which I want to ask about later, because I think you have an obvious love for music. But what were your experiences previously with cooking? Like, or do you consider yourself a grillman, a chef dinner? Like how do you like look at yourself? I guess.
As an Australian, I think we all grow up knowing how to cook on a barbecue, but how we cook in Australia it's not really barbecue. It's grilling. It's steaks and sausages and other things like that. But we don't actually smoke anything. We just grill. But my journey really started when I got my first real job when I was like 15 years old. I got a job at a restaurant washing dishes, and I got that job because some of my friends were working there already, and I thought it would be really fun. So I was a really good dishwasher, actually. I was good at that. I enjoyed that.
That was my first job too.
Yeah. And
I also think that I'm good to the point where today I still don't mind doing dishes.
We should have a dish off sometime.
It also is in a roundabout way. It was also
I am accepting this.
When you started at a pizza place, and that was my first job. You were dough roller and dish man.
Right.
Yeah.
So you rolled the dough like until you couldn't roll no more, and then I was in a busy place, and then back in the dishes, and then I had the sprayer and soapy water, and I could fly through piles of dishes and be like, "Come on, bring it," and then jump back in the dough roller and keep going.
Not to derail you for too long, but there's something you earn your patience through that type of work.
Yeah.
Because I remember I'm guessing this happened to you, but I remember people like yelling at me to move, hustle, fucking move faster, and just trying to fill dishwashers and scrape food off, and some of the dishes came out with shit still on them. It was like, you get pushed around because you're the lowest rung.
Yeah.
And they know you're not going to quit because it's your first job, and you need some money because you're probably in high school and you want to be able to use your car and do things.
It also gives you a level
with your car and stuff like that.
Gives you a level of respect, which I know because I work with Tim. Our dishwashers and our cleaning ladies, they're the hardest working people in the building, and we respect that. And
That's
we
good.
It. Yeah.
I'm very happy to hear that.
Yep. The whole team.
I did cut you off though, so you started with dishes and what can only be described as drying rags.
Started with the dishes, and maybe after a year or so, I started to fill in the kitchen. Just when there was somebody called in sick, I'd jump on the fryers, and I started to pick that up. And then maybe 6 or 8 months after that, I'd learned enough in the kitchen that I could actually run the grill. And it was an extremely busy restaurant, maybe 150 seats, and line out the door every night.
150.
And I could comfortably run the grill, and I was only like 16 years old.
So I would feel anxiety. So you were just ran through it.
You get in the zone, and
Okay.
when you're in the zone, it's a magic place to be. You can be so busy, and you can be doing so many things at the same time, but there's this concentration, and I loved that. I kind of got addicted to that. So I left that restaurant, and I moved to a much better restaurant, and this was a steakhouse that I moved to, and I moved there when I was about 17. And this restaurant it wasn't huge. It was a little bit over 100 seats, but there were 3 guys in the kitchen, and it was 1 guy on the grill, and then 2 other guys who kind of ran around and plated everything up, got the salads ready, got the sides ready, did all the fish, did the chicken, and things like that. And that was kind of my entry into what I think is a more professional, real kitchen. And it took a while for them to, even let me touch the grill there. I mean, they had one guy that had been working there for like 15 years or something. He's probably still working there. And if he was off, there was a chef from the sister restaurant that came and filled in. But if every now and then I would get to fill in on the grill, and that was when things went to a whole new level.
That seems to me like a big threshold, because you're now in control of what the customer receives in some way, so that's a lot of responsibility. And
in the steakhouse, the person on the grill drives the whole kitchen, because everything is timed to when those steaks are ready. And so you have to be, timing. This is what I loved about it. You'd have maybe 10 or 15 dockets at the same time, so you could have anywhere between 30 to 40 steaks on the grill at any one time. Different cuts of steak. There are different hot spots on the grill, different thicknesses of steak, and you've got to cook them all to different donenesses. You have to time them all so that these 5 steaks on this docket are all finished at the same time, and then these 3 that are going on the next docket are finished at the same time. And you're communicating with the other guys in the kitchen what they need to have ready in time to finish when you finish. And that was, if you talk about being in the zone, and that kitchen was like 35, 40 degrees every day.
So how can you, just quickly, for people who've never spent time in the kitchen, and I'm also curious, so part of that timing process, do you have different parts of the grill at different temperatures, at different...
just grills, the way grills
Because I imagine
work.
it's a big grill if you're saying how many steaks could be on it at any one time?
Yeah, 30, 40.
30, 40, that's okay, so that's a big piece of hardware.
Yeah. So the other thing you have to factor in, as your grill gets full and it traps the heat, because the meat traps the heat, so things start to cook faster. So there's all these little things that you got to think about.
So you're doing quick math all the time.
Yeah, it got to the point where I can just look at a steak and I know how it's cooked. Look. Some people
there's that experience.
Yeah, some people, you kind of learn by touching it and you feel by how firm it is. Mm-hmm. But it got to the point where, I could look at the grill, and the complicated thing was remembering which one everything had to be, because we didn't have any labels or anything like that. So things that were going a little fast, you'd pull them down to the front of the grill where it was a little bit cooler, and you could slow them down and put the other ones higher up on the grill to speed them up. But it was the sense of coming through that rush period and getting the last steak off the grill. It was kind of this euphoria that was it's hard to describe, but it was so good. Such a great feeling.
I could describe it a little because I've experienced it when I was a similar age in the pizza place, running the whole sandwich station, usually a 2-man operation, and the only way to describe it is like it's zen-like, there's no wasted motion. Everything is perfectly timed. And did you experience when you were in those moments? I know I did. I had a 5 to 2 a.m. shift at the pizza place. It would be 5:30, we start going, or 6 o'clock, you're in full go. And then you pull your last docket and you hand the last meal out and you look at the clock and it's 12:30, you're like, fuck yeah. There's no time. It felt like that. But you nailed everything.
And it's then when you realize you haven't had a drink of water for 3 hours, you're drenched in sweat. It's just great. It's fun.
Well, for both of you, it sounds to me like you both like putting yourself in challenging situations. Certain types, of course, we all have our different like games or different sport-like environments we like to play in. But just to step away from food just for a second, are there other things or hobbies or challenges you like to tackle?
I used to play guitar. That was something that I would kind of challenge myself in my free time to get better. Back when I lived in Australia, I skateboarded. I actually brought my skateboard to Vietnam and skated around for a little while. And back then, nobody had skateboards, and that was good fun. But it was really mostly about cooking for me. When I wasn't at work cooking and I had some time off, I like to cook at home, and I figured out quite early on that I came from a family of 5 people, and I figured out that my parents, they cooked most nights, but any break that they could have, like if I offered to cook dinner, they would just be like, yes, like please go for it. So I figured out that if I offered to cook dinner, I got to choose what we ate. It was like a win-win, right? I get to choose. I get to have the fun of cooking it, and I also get to eat exactly what I wanted to eat that day. So that's kind of how it became a hobby at home as well.
Was there a typical household meal that your family would eat? That you weren't cooking, I should say.
My dad used to cook roasts.
Okay.
Roast lamb, roast chicken. We had that probably about once a week. There were some other things we did quite a lot. My grandma made the best meat pies in the world, and we used to make those ourselves. In Australia, we kind of have a pretty mixed array of dishes that we frequent. Thai food and Chinese food, and Greek food. And
I really didn't learn about Australian cuisine. I always thought of it as shrimp on the barbie, all the things that you hear.
That's what's fed to us from Hollywood.
But also what's Australian? Oh, that means you put eggs and beetroot on your hamburger if you're from Australia. That was like the stereotypes, I guess, of the cuisine. But I learned that eating mince pies here, and I'm like, okay, that's an Australian thing. I'm like, oh, I thought that was more English, but it is. It's like part of the English cooking, and then a very big part of Asian, India, curries, Thai. It's all, coming from the States and working with Tim, he's asking me for things. I'm like, what the hell's Turkish delight? And I'm like, what? He knows all these, but that's all in Australia. It's pretty wild.
So that's really where I became like passionate about cooking. I wouldn't say it was an outrageous kind of passion of mine at that time. When I came to Vietnam and I had my own kitchen and I could cook for myself as often as I wanted, and I kind of had the necessity. I had to cook for myself. That's when I really, I started to appreciate Vietnamese food and Asian food on a new level, and started to play around a little with that. And then I started to realize, well, I can mash everything I know together, and I can make Vietnamese dishes with Western ingredients and do them in a way that nobody has ever had them before, and I can make Western dishes with Vietnamese ingredients and totally change the flavor profile. Mm-hmm. It's just something really interesting.
I want to ask you, because I know this will tie into your first meeting with Mark, but I want to ask you about your early, not adventures, but like what are some of the early shows, early acts you really got into? Like what got you into going to see music?
Music? The very first show I saw, it was an underage show. I was 16, and I was going to see a band from Brisbane called Regurgitator, and they're actually a really, really good band, and they're one of Australia's best bands, and back then they were just kind of breaking into the scene. I was 16 and I went to this show at a place called the Roxy, and the opening act for this show was a Japanese band called the Boredoms. So this is the first time I've ever seen live music, and I walk in, and if you've never heard the Boredoms,
I don't believe I have.
I think you should try it out.
Okay.
It's kind of hard to explain, but the lead singer, his name is Yamakura Ai, and all he does is screams and makes these bizarre noises. And he's got this full band, like there's trumpets, and it's just like it's a wall of noise. There's no kind of structure to anything. It's just this crazy kind of assault on your senses.
Would you put it in? Would you call it a noise band?
Yes.
Like okay.
Yeah, it was just like.
Do you know Melt Banana?
I've heard Melt Banana
I think
before.
is a little more structured than what you're saying, but maybe. But that's. got to see them live in Danbury, Connecticut.
Right.
I want to be careful with this because if I ever meet this woman, and I'm afraid she'll kill me, because she's this like petite Japanese woman who just seemed like hard as nails, and I just got on stage and she's just has such a presence, at least in the show I saw, and she's screaming in English and sometimes Japanese, and it's just like a wall of punk noise. It's like some hybrid. I was into them for a while, but that was your first experience, your first show. What were some of the early bands that defined? How old were you again?
I was 16 when I saw them. Yeah.
So music really defines us when we're young.
Yeah.
Thinking up until you came to Vietnam, like what were some big bands that really influenced you?
Definitely Nirvana.
Sure.
That was kind of my band in high school. That's the whole reason I learned to play the guitar. I kind of learned every song, not that they're very hard, but I learned every song that Nirvana.
They're satisfying to play.
Yeah, right. They're a lot of fun.
Drain You and In Bloom are kind of fun.
Yeah.
To play.
And then things like Primus.
Oh, sure.
Mr. Bungle.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've been looking a little more into him.
Yeah.
You're telling me that at the beer truck.
Kind of some kind of they weren't overly obscure, but they were kind of on the fringe. Things like that I really, really liked at that time. It wasn't until I came to Vietnam and I spent a lot of time with Jake that I really started getting into like Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin, the Beatles. So that all came later for me.
Okay.
But when I was a teenager, it was even Green Day back then. I like Green Day. I like the Smashing Pumpkins, that kind of grunge punk.
Smashing Pumpkins, Chicago.
Yeah. And then
I don't know why I felt like I had to confirm that, but yeah.
yeah. So I listened to them a lot in high school, and yeah.
So then you met Jake. Jake, as you're saying, opened you up to some more stuff in different areas of music, and then that led you to what was it, Lollapalooza?
It was Lollapalooza. So
that led you guys to your meeting.
Yeah, Jake and I would listen to a lot of music together. Jake is always listening to music, and he's always recommending what his hot thing is at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I got big into that, and I was listening to at that time like Bon Iver and TV on the radio, bands like that I was really enjoying, and
Of Montreal.
Fleet
Foxes. They were all kind of lumped into that art rock movement of the time.
Yeah, and Jake said that he was going to go back to Chicago and see some music shows, and I was kind of just listening to him say that, and then he mentioned that I think Lollapalooza was going to be on, and Jane's Addiction were going to play, and all those bands we just mentioned.
It was, Jake had said he was coming,
yeah,
and I don't think you were on board yet, but Jake's like, he's like, what shows are there? So I started looking, and he's like, perfect, I'm going to come in. Jake actually came in longer. He came in for Pitchfork music also, but he got on Skype and he's like, "Hey, dude, I told my friend Tim about this concert and the bands that are gonna be there. It's like 4 or 5 of his all-time favorite bands. He says he wants a ticket, and they were like $175 for a 3-day pass." And I'm like, "Are you sure he's gonna come?" I'm like, I can get it, but they're expensive. And I was worried, but then. Yeah, once we got it, that's when we first started talking, and his curiosity for food and all that. Those first things he asked me, like, Jake says, American barbecue. Can we check it out? And so I'll let you finish on that, but
yeah, we can finish on the music quickly, but of that weekend, the standout to me was Of Montreal.
Oh yeah,
they were.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved them.
It wasn't just the music; it was the theater. I mean,
yeah.
They were putting pornographic material on a news feed up on one side of the stage, and this allegoric type like biblical storytelling acted out on the stage. Two of Montreal's really, I don't know, playful music that they had. It was. I didn't expect that to be the band I would walk away saying they're fucking amazing.
How would you class? We just call them indie pop.
Yeah. Alternative rock, indie, whatever.
I mean, it's not pop.
What's his name? Tim Barnes or something like that, or Rod Barnes?
I can't remember.
Big respect for that dude.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember that the thing that I remember the most about their set there's one of their songs, I can't think of the name of it right now, but they just kind of hit this part of the song where they just play the same note again, like dun 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 dun. And it just went on and on and on, and I've never seen the crowd so worked up to
started roaring and then exploded.
Absolutely kind of nothing. It was just crazy.
Have you gotten to see any shows recently?
Recently, no. It's really hard to see much in Vietnam.
Yeah, there's kind of a urge for that here.
The last time I was in America, I was in Atlanta, and I got to see Ween. Which was incredible.
That's cool. They still tour?
So Yesail that trip too. I think they split up.
You saw who?
Yesail.
You saw Yesail.
That was really fun too.
That's really cool.
Yeah. But no, in Vietnam, there's no live music here right now. Many years ago, I was working for a live rock music club that was bringing in some bands. We brought Rat-a-Tat over. We brought I Heart Hiroshima.
I heard Rat-a-Tat was here.
Yeah.
What year was that? 2014?
No, it was before that. Maybe 2011.
Okay.
12 something. It was really funny. Those guys came in and they had
I heard I just missed them.
They had a massive night the night before, and they were jet lagged and they were hungover, and it was my job to try and wake them up in the green room, and they kept telling me to fuck off, and the only way they would get up on stage is if I gave them a bottle of Jack Daniels each. So of course I did, and they walked out on stage both necking from their bottles of Jack Daniels, and they did an insane set. They're about an hour late, maybe an hour 15 late.
Where did they play again?
It was a place I was running at the time called the Hi-Fi, and the Hi-Fi.
Oh, I've heard of that, but that's not open anymore, is it?
No, it was owned by a Vietnamese woman, and she figured out pretty early on after we opened that anytime we brought the foreign bands in, the expat community would turn up and they would drink 25,000 dong Tiger draft.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the nights that we didn't have bands, she would fill the venue with Vietnamese DJs, and the Vietnamese guys would come along and buy 2 million dong bottles of Hennessy. So very, very quickly she was like, why am I having live rock shows here at all? And she turned it into a full-on Vietnamese nightclub. And then the guys I was working with went off and opened up Cargo. So Cargo came out of the Hi-Fi. Yeah. Regurgitator played at Cargo, actually. Cheers.
When did they play? Wait a minute. 2015?
No, much longer than that.
No, okay. I went to some shows there, but I was drinking.
You're drinking the new for Vietnam. Deschutes is here now. This is pretty much their no bullshit porter. It's a nice 5.5% porter. It's nice.
The Black Butte Porter.
Yeah.
Actually, this would probably pair well with the gooeyduck. Now that I'm thinking about it.
So when you guys first met, you had an excellent barbecue experience, and you got to see some awesome shows at Lollapalooza. Then some time passed, and you guys met up again. That was in Vietnam, the second year.
A year later, a year later I came on a trip. Most of the trip I was up in central Vietnam with Jake. But when I came into town, I had 2 or 3 days. Was running around with you and Nico and some of that old gang, and took me to some Vietnamese stalls. First place was a breakfast place, I remember some of this. I haven't eaten some of that stuff since, but I would like to go back, and some of it was really good. And then, yeah, he showed me around and let me drink all the beers Vietnam had to offer at the time. And then, yeah, next time we met was, I've already told this story in previous episodes, was
you went on
Jake's
there
wedding,
yesterday.
and we did some barbecue here, and Tim just asked, hey, you want to try this? Want to do a barbecue restaurant?
So when you guys first opened Udu, anxieties aside, because I'm sure there was a lot, because that's always a struggle. What was the first great night you had?
Oh, I think the first night, right?
First night we were pretty
Was it really?
psyched.
I mean, we didn't
That's
have many
awesome.
customers, but like
We
had some friends come in, and it was great. They came in, they loved everything. We loved everything because we'd worked so hard on it, and it just kind of all came together on that one night.
Yeah, I think the first thing that we were celebrating was we made a slab of bacon. We didn't realize that, it takes 8 days to make it. We had, I think I already had some more on Ryan, but it was 5 or 6 days away. And we just had, 3 tables of friends downstairs, about 20 people. And every table ordered 2 or 3 orders of bacon. They ate all the bacon we had. We're like, oh, we better start making more bacon. and it was just, everything was like that. And I think by the first weekend, we were open for 3 or 4 days, and we had to close for 2 days because it was just trending so fast. We were running out of everything. We had to double everything, and it was...
What did the first menu look like? What was on that?
We had most of the things that we had on there are still on the menu. Most of them. One notable exception is we had a really delicious blackened fish, blackened snapper, and it was it was a whole snapper. And the problem with it is cooking it, because it had so much cayenne pepper in it. Whenever we get an order for it, it would fill the kitchen up with this noxious black smoke.
eye burning smoke, yeah.
All the staff running out into the street coughing their lungs out. So we kind of realized quickly that we couldn't have that one on the menu. There's no fried chicken
It was
on the menu.
also, we were learning, it also always took 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And what it was doing to the whole rest of the menu, we could fire in less than 10 or 15 minutes always. And then it was a great value. The whole, it was a lot of fish, and it was cheap, and people loved it. But I wonder if we can't get we got some good guys in the team now. Get something like that back on the menu.
Would something like a hood would pull the smoke away, would pull the heat away too? Could you set up like a smoke hood or something?
Oh, we could now. Back then, we built the first restaurant so ghetto.
Oh,
so
certainly
cheap.
at the time. I mean, you're just dealing with the
We
reality.
could certainly figure it out now. Sure.
I don't remember that being on the menu, but
It was only the first week or two, and then it was gone.
you opened in
March
of
2014.
14. Oh yeah, 2014. Yeah, it would have been. I think I first went there in May. I believe in May.
So we
I
have
got
told
to be
that
on
story
March.
of when we met, and everyone's heard it from a few different media sources and in our podcast. But what I haven't asked the question is, what when you asked me, I mean, we were on Jake's rooftop, and you just said, "How do you feel about coming over here and opening a barbecue restaurant?" What made you think that, as opposed to whatever you were working on before that moment? What made you? I mean, was it just a hunch, or is it something that you?
What was I working on at that point?
I think you said you were talking about possibly opening an ice cream restaurant instead of a barbecue restaurant.
Yeah, that's right. So I had become enamored with the idea of street food, and one thing that had been disappearing from the streets was back when I first arrived, you would hear this jingle played from speakers, and it was the sound of the Walls ice cream people kind of driving around on bicycles or pulling a little esky along and selling ice cream in the street. And I thought that was really cool. And I still love Vietnam for everything being available in the street and things that go around. I wanted to launch a concept of ice creams, like popsicles, which would drive around parks and schools and offer like really funky flavors, really, really nicely made popsicles. And you could even go to, drive them out the front of nightclubs and do boozy popsicles and things like that. So I was kind of working on this, and I was...
do boozy?
Yeah. Like a Kahlua popsicle or...
Oh, okay.
Something like that.
Cool.
And I was experimenting a lot at home. I was also experimenting with a fish and chip concept at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd been working for other people for so long, and I thought I had enough knowledge, and I thought I had enough skill to kind of finally do something on my own. And I liked the popsicle idea and I liked the fish and chip idea, but it didn't like really hit me. I was working on it, I was trying to make it, I was maybe trying to believe in it more than it deserves. And then having Mark's Barbecue, and I just realized that this is a lot more in my territory. Ice cream, okay, yeah,
well,
I love ice cream. But
surely working on those projects, it was good to put yourself through that.
yeah, exactly.
I mean, a failed project is only failed if it leads to nothing else.
Yeah.
Like
I didn't even get them off the ground. I just spent kind of some months cooking in my kitchen, making ice cream, making fish and chips every way I possibly could figure out. But while I was doing it, I was putting my head into the space of all the things that I would need to do to get a restaurant open. And then when we changed to barbecue, all those things they're all kind of the same. It's just you apply them in a slightly different way. So meat and barbecue, that's a lot more who I am at the core. I can eat steak and burgers and things like that 3 times a day, 7 days a week without any problem. Fish and chips I can have maybe once a month or something. So when Mark was on board, it felt this is the one. This is what we can really
to me it was
do well.
I wasn't doubtful. I was asking, what do you mean open a restaurant? Especially to our friends back in the U.S. If how is that going to work? And you, I asked, I guess any normal questions someone would ask when asked to move around the world and do something like that. I'm like, how do we do this? And I think early on you were really pushing for it. You were very organized and I think I said something along the lines to you. I'm like, because I didn't have those organizational skills and I didn't know how it would work and I didn't know what to do to have a restaurant. I wanted one in the States and I never could get past, that's too much to invest. It's too scary. And you were like, well, no, I've been here a while and we could get a restaurant open for very cheap and my concerns, I'm like, we need a real rock solid business plan and know what we're doing and when are we going to get a return on all this work. And I think I left in December of 2012 and January of 2013 you emailed me a whole business plan with all this stuff and then I'm like, okay, I think this might work, and I just said let's do it.
Yeah, if you remember back the the very first idea that we had was that it was going to be American street barbecue. So we wanted to have like a place where we smoked all the ribs and the pork shoulder, And then we'd have carts that we'd positioned around the city on street corners, and instead of going and having a bowl of pho on a street corner, you could go and have a quarter rack of ribs or pulled pork and things like that. And
Not a bad idea.
I still love that idea, but the more we thought about it, the more we realized, okay, territory is
getting kicked off sidewalks and coffee money to the right people. It was difficult.
It's competitive, and it's not exactly legal. And the way we kind of got around it is we decided that the place that we were going to open up in the end had to have a big pavement, had to have a big sidewalk, so we could still replicate a little bit of that street dining type thing. And
Well, yeah, outside your restaurant, your flagship restaurant, you always had the tables out on the street.
which were also highly illegal, and they got confiscated a few times.
Oh yeah, I heard.
Until we got banned from doing it permanently.
Oh, you can't do it anymore. Well, I mean, you had the other location, but I actually haven't been back to that one.
Yeah, for those people that haven't ever been to our restaurants, what that led to is every single one of our restaurants is very open.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think we've also learned, because we've opened a lot of different style restaurants now. Every time we go away from a very open restaurant, it's a struggle for us. That's the signature of what we are, and yeah.
That's just what it's how Vietnamese people eat. They like being connected to outside, eating under the stars or eating in the fresh breeze is wonderful.
Or even under a retractable roof.
Yeah, which is certainly nice in the heat of sun or if it's raining.
We opened in March, and by June and July, we were. It was literally insane. We had such huge lines out the restaurant that people would pull up on motorbikes, and I would have this list of 30 or 40 tables already in a waiting list. We didn't take any reservations.
I remember going there when that was happening.
And
Yeah,
people would say, how long?
You had the little buzzer things.
Yeah, and people would say, how long? And we'd say 2 hours, and they'd say, okay, can you put my name down? And we'd say, are you kidding? Like, you really want to wait 2 hours to eat here? And I think the funniest night it was probably in July that year. We had 2 big red kind of portable tents that we rolled outside to protect people from the rain. And there was a particularly nasty storm one night. And there's so many people waiting, and there was, these tents would have covered the tables that were outside. And there was not enough space for people to kind of all get under the tents and inside. And there was one guy who, he sat on the edge of the tent where all the water was running off. And, torrential Ho Chi Minh City.
It was so bad that if we didn't poke it with a stick and push the water off, the thing was going to collapse on people.
Yeah.
So I remember I was the one right there when we were clearing the water, like literally 20 or 30 liters of water just, it was whoosh, like you ever seen the movie Flashdance?
He was sitting there, and he couldn't squeeze in to get out of the direct kind of torrential rain running off this canvas. Yeah. And he just sat there and he ate his entire meal.
Just getting
soaked. The entire thing. It was ridiculous.
He was on the corner, I remember that very well.
That's dedication.
And his whole table, his friends were laughing at him, and he's just eating, getting soaked. Yeah, I felt bad that night. I'm like, am I a bad restaurant owner? Why did we let that happen?
Yeah, good sense of humor.
Cheers. This is the fresh haze, right?
This is the fresh haze.
Delicious.
I'm getting a little bit of hot burn on the throat, though.
Yeah.
But it's tastes nice.
Hot burn?
So these hazy and these juicy IPAs, you feel that a little bit? It's not bitterness. I mean, it's kind of like I don't know, to me it feels like when you get like really strong sugar in the throat, that's like that rough.
Okay.
That's what I call hot burn.
Hot burn, okay.
I notice it a little. Fresh squeeze is my favorite to shoot, though. I agree. Mirror Pond is pretty damn good, too.
I didn't bring that one tonight. But we do have fresh squeeze in here.
So,
I think
Well, you know, it's kind of cool, and I didn't really put it together until I was thinking back about the street carts and how we originally wanted to do it, and what your latest addition to the whole company was. It was your idea, 100%. Was the beer truck? Is that partially where that idea came from?
I've wanted to do a beer truck a truck for the longest time, and I was trying to figure out why we never did it, and I think we
Also wasn't really available too.
Yeah, it was a combination of not being available and the laws not being clear, and we thought you can't get licensed for it. And then when we saw that 365 had their truck, it was kind of eye opening that okay, wow, maybe this is possible. We just jumped on it straight away, and yeah, now we have a beer truck. A couple of weeks later, it's great, and maybe many more to come. Who knows?
So I got to talk with you a little bit on the opening event.
Yeah.
We did discuss this, but what made you pick that little alleyway, that location?
There are not a lot of places accessible to downtown Ho Chi Minh City that you can do something and not have too many curious onlookers spoil the fun. If someone doesn't like what you're doing, within a matter of minutes, the neighborhood watch people will be around and ask you to move on. So I like that area of Tutim because for the last few years since they cleared it, it's this massive, huge area of just nothing.
Yeah, it's just reeds and a couple of rivers
and mosquitoes. Yeah,
a lot of mosquitoes.
So I drive there a couple of days a week. I drive past there, and I've always seen that little street, and I wondered where it went to. So some months ago, I drove down and I just ducked in, and it's 100 meters long and it ends in a dead end. So I thought this is an unusual little street. A lot of people fly past it and don't think for a second to look down there. It wasn't my first choice of where we wanted to park the truck that night. My first choice was on a big highway, kind of an 8-lane highway that they built through that area that's not yet operational. The problem is to get to it, you have to go through a security checkpoint, and they have big concrete barriers and...
is that the one that's going over the Tutim tunnel?
Yeah, it kind of goes straight through that whole area, and then... But there are security people that are there, and I drove my bike through there a few times, and nobody messed with me, but trying to drive a truck through there is...
We'll do that first?
Yeah. Is where we thought, and if we had a lot of people turning up, a lot of foreigners turning up on motorbikes, security guards are probably going to get a little bit...
That's the amount. Yeah, put a quarter of a teaspoon into a 30-liter pot.
Chad sent me a picture. He's in America right now. He sent me a picture of some
This is another one.
restaurant he went to that has a huge range of hot sauces.
This was another hot sauce that was really popular from season 2 of Hot Ones.
That was delicious.
It's not that hot, but it's wonderful.
It's very tasty. It's not.
Is it shaken?
I'm not sure, but that one is.
That one you could eat a spoonful of.
Yeah,
It would be great on wings or something.
It's just delicious.
Maybe I need to make a hot sauce with blueberry. Yep, right in the drawer closest to the fridge. At Beercraft, usually it's me and Tim thinking about what beer next. Oh shit, I'm not thinking. Tim's like, hey, that's...
I wasn't going to say anything. I was going to let it happen.
Don't let that happen. What are you talking about?
That's my fresh squeeze. That's funny.
It's nice.
Instinctually, I just filled my glass.
Yeah, I saw it and I was like, oh, that's going to be funny. We got that on
I
film.
think I got more in here.
It's kind of funny. This bottle of Bravado Spice Company Ghost Pepper and Blueberry,
Thanks, man.
0 grams fat. less than 1 gram of carbohydrate, no protein. It's got nothing in it.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's got to be some carbohydrate from the sugar of the blueberries, right?
Less than 1 gram.
But,
Well, but how much is a serving?
but
Maybe
don't
a
peppers
shake.
have?
You know?
I thought peppers have like extremely high vitamin
Vitamin C as well.
A, vitamin C. Yeah, but
Yeah, it's tasty. Okay, sorry, what was your question? The last beer launch?
Yeah, well, because Deschutes always has a good amount
cheers,
of
guys. Got another one?
dank aroma to it, and it led to the inspiration for the newest craft beer that we have.
I'm going to Yeah, so we decided to reach out to some of our partners in the brewing community, Pasteur Street, and see if we could do a beer together. And we gave them a brief that we wanted to do a beer that tasted like marijuana. That was kind of it. Those guys did an amazing job, I think. They set up a really nice base beer, and we had quite a few sessions sitting down and tasting it and trying to figure out how close it was to tasting like marijuana. And then figuring out creative solutions to get around the fact that we didn't actually have marijuana in the beer, of course.
Well, it's the hemp plant, right?
There's not actually hemp in it either. It tastes remarkably close to it, but the original plan was to put hemp in. We did our very best to research legally in Vietnam whether you can do that or not, and there's no precedent. Nobody has any idea about it. Hemp is not on the list of restricted plants in Vietnam, but it's still, as a lot of things in Vietnam are, it exists in a gray area that if somebody wants to challenge it and cause problems, they can. So we figured out these workarounds, and Pasteur Street figured out these workarounds, and we sat there session after session. We had a little bag of pot, and we would sniff that, and then we'd sniff the beer, and we got closer and closer until we found something that was really quite close to the smell of marijuana.
Yeah, it was. A lot of beer companies have made dank IPAs, and there's even been companies that have called it. There's one out there called Bong Water from I forget which brewery, but a lot of U.S. breweries have had their go at making a really dank. That's the nickname we give to the marijuana beers.
That's what the kids are calling it these days.
It's kind of cool because Pasteur Street went through they changed their brewer halfway through it. So
Yeah.
David Byrne, who we had on a past episode, started the beer. He built the base beer, and then Alex, who's the CEO of Pasteur Street, and also he hired a new brewer, Andrew. And between Andrew, Alex, and David, we had a lot of world-class brewers all working on the same beer, and then even Andrew's additions, he decided hey, I know these type of herbs and this herb flower all remarkably smell like marijuana, and started actually pitching herbs in there, so not just hops to get the flavor right there. I think the sum of all the people who worked on it, they came up with something truly unique. It's an amazing beer, and
That is yummy. That's delicious.
that'd be a great chicken wing.
I'm just curious how you interact in this world we live in at this moment.
I have a guilty pleasure, which is following the whole Trump controversy.
Oh, I haven't heard much about that. What's going on?
I listen to Trump news kind of.
He's in a news station? He should.
I listen to news about Trump
FNN, the fake news network.
on the way to work. I listen to it at work.
That must be exhausting.
I don't know. It's like this amazing soap opera that
It is.
it's always it just seems to be in the last season, like for the last 2 years, because it keeps.
This is the final episode. They're gonna get him, or no, he got them, and then
It's I have no skin in the game. I'm not American. I I really don't have any. Nothing really impacts me from it, but I find it so fascinating. I don't even know who the Prime Minister of Australia is right now, but I can tell you who all the key positions in the Trump government are.
I learned from The Simpsons the Prime Minister of Australia is whoever has the biggest boot.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know if that was a trope they ran with, but I'm going to just say that it is.
So YouTube for me, and it's mostly kind of watching MSNBC, and I tend to watch the left wing media stuff. That's what I like to listen to, and that's why I've not yet needed to jump into podcasts, because I have this never ending.
Well, that's satisfying part of it. Like,
yeah,
when you're, I imagine sometimes when you're cooking, that's on. Like when I have, I'm a bit of a podcast junkie. For certain podcasts, I'll listen to improvisational comedy part of the podcast, like Comedy Bang Bang or Never Not Funny or stuff like that. Those are my go-tos. Or Harmontown, we get a big kick out of Harmontown because it's Dan Harmon and he does Rick and Morty, and that's a solid.
That sounds really good. I'd really like to listen to that. But I know that tomorrow morning, when I'm having my shower, it's like, Trump raped somebody else, or Dan Harmon talks for an hour about funny stuff. I'm like, well, I gotta know about Trump raping people.
or getting peed on, or whatever.
Yeah, it's never ending. And
so would you say the biggest boots are what make you prime minister?
No, I think that may be why he's so fascinating. I do, but
Trump does have big boots.
No, it was the opposite. In America, it was whoever has the smallest hands. So that was how it works. Big boots and small hands, and it's just that's the difference between Australia and the U.S.
Guys, we're not on Twitter. You can't weigh in.
So that's my guilty pleasure, and that's why I have no time for listening to other stuff right now, unfortunately. And I won't until you guys vote Trump out, I guess.
I will always appreciate when someone is absorbing information in some respect, and however you choose to do that, that's up to you. I think there's something. What was it? Church key. I just like when people get into things, and I love seeing people. I love knowing people's little obsessions like that. That's it's what makes all of us. I find it interesting. It's what defines us. I listen to probably 2 hours of podcasts a day.
It's depressing that I'm defined by that then.
What? No, but you're deriving.
You're not a Trump supporter. He's a Trump drama lover.
Hold on, that came along. Yes, you are. I would say you're someone who is amazed by the theater of what's occurring, and so you're not defined by Trump or lackeys or what is occurring, but you are a person who you want to be in the know.
Yeah, I think the first time I became interested in American culture was when I lived in Atlanta for a couple of months. I was there training for Hard Rock Cafe, and I loved the people that I was working there with. They were really, really nice people, the kind of people that when they walk past a homeless person, they always stop and give them some money or just talk to them. And coming from Australia, like, you walk past a homeless person, you kind of like don't see them. You block them out of your vision. So when I was in America, I was kind of blown away by how friendly Americans are to strangers. But at the same time, it was really weird to me because I was Australian and I was there surrounded by Americans, and this thing at the time kept coming up, and they were like, you guys support the troops, right? You support the troops. And it was just this thing that kept getting repeated, and no one seemed to know what that meant exactly. You had to support the troops, but it was really odd to me. In Australia, we don't just blindly kind of...
Well, that nomenclature is purposely ambiguous. Like it's like how we define like unidentified enemy combatants. Was at one point what they just called an enemy, but what what that could be defined as in court, it's like terminology that just make things vague, but people latch onto those also with the I guess there's a creative aspect to it, but the problem with it is like what that means to you and me could be very different.
Yeah.
But still accurate to ourselves, and that means that there's a lot of ambiguity going around. Like support the troops. Like what does that mean? I think supporting the troops is trying not to involve ourselves in foreign wars. Other people would disagree with me and say, no, supporting the troops is like if a soldier walks by you, you lay out a red carpet or something. Or I'm not sure. I'm just speculating, but like, and someone else might think that supporting the troops is
no matter where they go or where they end up, you support them. goddammit.
Sure, and no matter no matter what they've done or something like that. And, I mean, to varying degrees, I do agree with all that. Like, I'm not anti American soldiers at all. It's just,
No, yeah, not at all. But
yeah, but it
the way
is
it's
a
been
very
spun into
ambiguous,
this kind of
undefined,
yeah,
hard to define term.
it's been spun into something that really is quite strange to the outsider who kind of doesn't grow up in that, and you go to restaurants and everyone's all about like you support the troops like they're a football team almost.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
And that's
also
where I was like, Americans are a little bit, they're very nice, but they're a little bit weird.
Yeah.
And
what do you mean weird?
I had a lot of American friends here, and I saw how involved they got in elections. I saw when Obama got elected. I even saw when Bush got elected for the second term here. So I was with my American friends when they went through these really big changes in their politics. So I kind of got sucked into it a little bit. And then when, the debacle before the 2016 election and just the theater of watching this play out, I got really drawn into it. And we even did we did an oyster poll at Beercraft where we created two different kinds of oysters. One was the Fiery Devil oyster that had chili and that was for Hillary, and we had the
Chili for Hillary.
We had the fake caviar and Russian champagne and gold dust oyster for Trump, and whichever oyster sold the most was going to predict the outcome of the election. And we had based on the oyster poll, we had Hillary as a strong winner. Oyster polls, I guess, can't be trusted.
Define a winner.
Sexy meat talks, go and put it.
All right, but so you just said sexy meat talks. Let me ask a question that we ask almost every time on the show.
To me or Tim?
To Tim.
Okay.
What's the sexiest meat you've ever had in your mouth?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Different ones he's considering.
I've had a lot of very sexy meat. Most meat is quite sexy, I think. Getting a really nice tomahawk steak cooked perfectly medium rare and just a little bit of salt. That'll do me every time.
We were talking at the beer truck and about doing this interview, and you had mentioned possibly getting that, getting a tomahawk steak for tonight.
But you got the cock and balls of the sea instead.
The cock and I still think of Adam Sandler when I hear that. But
lube up your cock and balls for grandma.
yeah.
Yeah.
But what is it about that particular cut that you like so much?
The fat.
Okay.
I've
I've not had one, so it would.
I just drilled on my shirt
for educational reasons. I'm gonna sit down and have one for the first time. What will I be experiencing?
So for a tomahawk, it's just a beautiful, nice big ribeye with the bone in.
Yeah. So that is the ribeye with the whole beef bone, which is it looks like a proper sized tomahawk axe.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I've seen pictures
between a
of it.
ribeye
I know
and a
what it
tomahawk,
looks
there's not much difference, but the tomahawk just makes it a little bit more theatrical.
The
a little bit
caveman
more
beat your
impressive.
chest piece of meat.
I love the pockets of fat that you get on ribeyes. I love the
that
tenderness.
outer
just
crown.
Oh yeah,
it's like 50-50 fat and beef.
It's just nothing like it in the world.
So I was going to follow up with what makes meat sexy, but you kind of just described it right there. It's the
I want to throw
fat
another,
to meat ratio.
Yeah, another one to the mix is maybe the first time I had your Wubba Wubba brisket. That was also one of those moments where everything changed. Oh no, there's another moment too. Because like if I think back to like actually having a moment in your kitchen when we made the bacon the first time. So a little backstory about this is we were opening a restaurant called Wank Udud, and Udud means, well, it's oink oink. We had to have the best pork available in the entire country. And we had gone through every single possible bacon that was available from small goods makers and supermarkets and butchers and everything. And nothing was like good enough for our menu because it was shit. So I think it was like 12 days before we opened our restaurant. We were like, well, we don't have any bacon. How can we have a pork restaurant without bacon? And we frantically did research and we pulled up,
Yeah, I think Tim's like, here, he has something he pulled up on Reddit or somewhere. You found this is a basic brown sugar brine. Let's give it a try. And I'm like, oh, okay, let's do it.
Yeah, there were 20 different recipes, and we just kind of picked one at random.
You put it in brine in your fridge in your old apartment.
Yeah.
And then you brought it down. We had the smoker at the restaurant, but the restaurant wasn't finished yet. And I think originally we put the smoker up on the rooftop because there was no restaurant there then. And I smoked the bacon for 2.5 hours, brought it back to my house, and Tim's like, well, what do we got?
And at this point, we didn't know if we were gonna like poison ourselves with botulism. We're like never experimented with brining or nitrites or anything like that before, and we kind of cut off these little pieces and we fried them in Mark's kitchen, a little fry pan, and we both ate it at the same time.
I remember we were giggling just from smelling it. We're like, that smells really good.
Yeah.
We were starting to get giddy. It was like, yeah, for two grown men to act like 5-year-olds on Christmas morning, that's how good the bacon was.
Yeah, and it was just, it was, modestly 1,000 times better than everything available here. And it was so easy to make. It was so simple. And it was the first recipe we chose. We chose it because of its simplicity. Mm-hmm. And that was a game changer. At that point, we knew, like, okay, if we want things on our menu to be, like, outstanding, we got to do it ourselves. We have to...
That's what gave... I mean, at that point, I was like... It was like... I remember Tim saying, we're a week away from opening. Give me your final menu right now. Well, what do you have? And it was like we had already... Because of the bacon, we had already taken that approach on the mac and cheese. And we figured out how to make... A brick of Velveeta was $25 here. And we're like, well, we can't use that. That's a gooey cheese.
But you know how to make it.
So we figured out how to make our own Velveeta and process the cheese and make it creamy. And
one of my
cheese crack.
One of my other little kind of geek obsessions is, I think, molecular gastronomy. So reading things like modernist cuisine and looking at chefs like Heston Blumenthal and just getting inspired by the level of detail that they go down to and also the science that they apply to food. It was something that...
Before you describe what it is, I want to take a guess at what microgastronomy means.
Okay.
Is that the interaction between microflora and the food that then passes through you?
No. So... molecular gastronomy.
Oh, molecular gastronomy.
It kind of refers to treating food as a science. And approaching it in a scientific manner. And
I hear gastronomy and I just assume it's what's going on down here.
So gastronomy is eating.
Yeah.
So, for example, the cheese in our mac and cheese, it's now, 5 years later, it's very widely known due to the internet that sodium citrate is the salt that you use that helps to
stabilize the emulsion of the oils in the waters.
Yeah, it helps to stabilize it. And at that time, they were using those techniques in very fancy restaurants. But we decided that we were going to bring that down to kind of the street barbecue level. And we were trying to source these things that there's no kitchen supply store here that has molecular gastronomy ingredients. So we were going to Chemistry Street in District 10, and we were buying these chemicals and kind of like fingers crossed that food grade,
Just to get an idea of that, because for people who don't live in Vietnam, there are, as you've long known, and I've long known, there are streets where there'll be multiple shops all selling the same thing.
Yes.
Fish Tank Street.
Yeah,
Motorbike Street.
like Chemical Street is here, and then right
Sandy
behind
Street.
it, the first half of the street is Rice Street, and then it's Rope after that.
Rope Street.
And there's
Rice and rope.
sinks and tiles and
So was Chemical Street just like 5 to 10 storefronts all selling the same types of chemicals?
yeah, and we a lot of them didn't want to deal with foreigners coming in and asking about chemicals, so we finally found one where they spoke a little bit of English, and we're like, hey, we want to make cheese, and this is exactly what we want to do. We need something food grade. Can you help us out? And they were very happy to help us out. And that's kind of the approach that we have with a lot of our menu. We took these ideas that were being used in fine dining restaurants, and we applied them to barbecue. And we didn't really announce it. We didn't shout it out. It was just kind of the way we did things, and it worked. And it was really, really, really delicious. And, we had to build our first sous vide machine because you couldn't buy. You couldn't at that time. You couldn't even buy sous vide.
Water heater elements that usually are used inside of a water heater for your shower. With fish tank pumps circulating the water and a digital display.
Really?
This was before sous vide were made like commercially online for people to buy in other countries, and we were building our own here, and I know nothing about electronics, but I'm going down and I'm trying to explain to the guy what I need, and we built it.
It's really cool.
Yeah, we would have to go to Fish Tank Street and buy pumps for fish tanks every couple of weeks because they would burn out because they were
the extreme temperatures of sous vide cooking. The fish tank pumps would just literally fall apart. They were plastic, and
it was great.
And our Vietnamese first chef, he's like, "It's broken." I was like, "Okay, we gotta get another pump." And from the day one when we opened, we had our bacon, we had our mac and cheese, we had our sous vide egg on the Caesar salad. So it's like, with a sous vide you can cook an egg, and that goes back to Tim's love of that molecular cooking. Modernist cuisine said there is a better way to cook an egg. Here, look at how much control we have. At this controlled temperature of 64 degrees, the egg, when you cut open the yolk, it breaks away and flows like thick lava. When you go to 65, it's just like putty. There's like many levels of soft-boiled egg that you can achieve, and that attention to detail in just dirty food like barbecue made it even more fun and delicious and sexy.
Tim, another question I want to ask: what is your favorite place to eat breakfast in the city? Can't be your own kitchen. Can't be Udo.
I don't
Your favorite
really
breakfast?
eat breakfast. But,
okay, you're not a breakfast eater?
No, I'm not. But I do have a favorite
Starbucks?
place. No, I do have a favorite place, actually.
Okay.
If I do eat breakfast, which is not very often, I have Eggs Benedict with salmon.
Okay.
And there is a hands down best Eggs Benedict with salmon in Ho Chi Minh City, and that is Madhouse. And
beans have been spilled.
it is excellent. It's consistently excellent. You can go to other places and get it really good one week, and then the next week it's not so good. But Madhouse
does do food well.
Yeah. Lunch
In terms of, like,
should
what you
always be a burger.
I completely agree with that.
And the thing about burgers is, one day you want something kind of greasy and kind of homely, and Chuck's or Burger Joint just hits the spot.
Mm-hmm.
And then other days you want something a little bit more refined.
More bistro burger.
Yeah, and then maybe you're on that day it's Mad Burger, or it's even Relish and Sons, they do a good burger. Marcel do a great burger. Soul Burger.
They won the Burger Fest, I think. Marcel Burger.
Yeah,
You're
quite.
I'm referencing an Outcast. I say that like you were there. I'm not even sure you were there. But
I wasn't, but
Mark and I went there, and many of the places were sold out. They were out of Tiger that night.
Yeah. We didn't stick around long,
Nah.
but we got there late. And they were out of half of the burgers, and
I love the idea of Burger Fest. The only thing is I eat all of those burgers all the time, and I don't want to be in a huge crowd of people lining up to eat it, so I'll just eat it the next day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Shouldn't have to struggle to eat a piece of meat.
that's right. It should be,
Convenient, easy to access. All
Get
right,
that.
and then let's go into the early afternoons, or late afternoons, early eves. Favorite dinner place.
This is where it gets quite tricky because I like so many different cuisines. I don't think there's any cuisine I don't like.
Something light. Let's start with light.
I don't
Something
eat light.
Something medium.
I don't eat medium.
Something heavy.
since there's so much there to think about, what's the sexiest thing you've had for dinner in the last month?
I had a
What takes the top?
really nice dinner at Tomatito last night. It was delicious.
Okay.
That was great.
Tomatito, friends of the show.
I had great pizza from the new 4P's truck a couple of nights ago. That also was fantastic. We went to District Federal a couple of nights ago as well. That was great. I only eat at great restaurants. So,
do you have a favorite Vietnamese spot?
A favorite Vietnamese spot?
So I'm not sure if any of the places you've mentioned are or are not Vietnamese owned. I know some of them are definitely foreign owned, but
We talking about Vietnamese owned or Vietnamese food?
could be Vietnamese owned.
Vietnamese owned. I
could be Vietnamese food,
really
too.
love the guys from Pizza 365. They just do the most fantastic Italian style pizza.
I agree.
On par with Reale and Pizza Amore and Pendelasco.
I think
I
Mark
just-
and I
they're
have
really nice
probably
people
had
too.
conservatively 30 pizzas.
I love
I
those.
get hung up on a couple other pizzas. The Italy sausage.
Yeah.
That's great.
Or now
I'm a
we've
truffle guy.
morphed. I liked their artichoke pizza and I liked the truffle one. But now me and Josh have been going in and we go, give us the Italy sausage with artichoke and truffle.
With the artichoke and truffle. It's disgustingly good. It's so fucking good.
I love that. There's so many that I like. I'm a huge fan of bun ut. I'm a huge fan of bun thịt nướng, bun xeo, those kind of street things.
Yeah.
I'm
I
always
think
down
Bun
for.
Thịt Nướng is my favorite. Although Mi Wang is like real close.
Oh yeah, Mi Wang is right up there.
Yeah. I hear it's even better in the middle of Vietnam, and that's confusing to my senses because I love it whenever I try it.
Yeah,
So,
Mi Wang is, and Golo in Hoi An. If I'm ever in Hoi An, I only eat Golo.
a great bowl. Yeah.
It's amazing.
I don't know if I've heard that one, but
Gala, it's like a Vietnamese udon. It's this big, thick, square noodle, and
It's a little bit similar to Mi Wang, I guess. It's kind of one of those semi-dry noodles.
Okay.
There's not a lot of broth.
Not a lot of broth. And
I don't think I've had that.
if unless you've been to Hoi An, you probably don't.
Okay, but yeah.
You can
There's-
occasionally
there is
get
one-
it outside.
There
but
is one place in the city that makes it, and I had it because I asked about Kala when I moved here. And Jake's the guy. I found one place. He's here, and Jake brought it home one night. And while it was good and all the parts were there, it was not the same.
I think they make the noodles
They say that there's a well that
Yeah,
all
there's
the water
It's the
from the
water.
well, it's the mineral content in the water that gives the noodle.
Even when I lived in Da Nang, which is 40 minutes from Hoi An, it was hard to find galo even in Da Nang, and even when you had it, it was not the same.
What's the other? There's another famous Hoi An dish, the white rose or something.
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy that one that much though, but. And now we got an East West Pale, which I think is a damn good beer out of all the suppliers that we work with. Sean, the brewer at East West, does an amazing job.
He's a nice guy too. I met him once over at your place.
He's nice. He's a brilliant brewer. He's super good looking. He's got an awesome family. Stupid, sexy Sean.
Yeah, stupid, sexy asshole. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
That is yummy.
Yeah, they just started getting this at a little Vietnamese owned mart in the bottom of one of the towers where I live.
So you can grab a nice craft beer right downstairs every day if you want.
Yeah, and it's just like you said. They have a Vin Mart, and they have a Circle K, and then the third one is just a family owned place, which I always go to because they know me, and they're just like, if I'm sick, which is very rare, or I'm just really busy, I can text the guy and be like, hey, I need this, and this. Could you please bring it up? And he'll run it up. And it's there in like 5-10 minutes, and I tip him. And it's just, he's such a nice dude. And like,
That's very Vietnam too, right? It's the relationships you make and the people you know.
yeah. I feel like I'm walking to a hometown store, because the first city I lived in is the first big city is Ho Chi Minh. I lived in Portland, Oregon for a time, but
Not quite as big.
No, not on the same scale. I want to go back to the beer truck.
Yeah, sure.
Because I think this speaks a lot to your personality. An observation many people made was there was Vietnamese people. So let me step back for a second. So the beer truck was about maybe 50 meters down a road, and a road that dead ends into a bunch of reeds and like gravel and stuff. And the beer truck was set up, and we put a picture up, and you guys put pictures up, and so you can see this on the websites.
And we'll probably put a picture up on the podcast right at this moment so they can
Probably could
see it.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a way to do that. I'll try to figure that out. And so like the beer truck's facing the road, and it has like the marquee sign. I'm not sure if that's exactly the right way to describe it, but those yellow lights, those bright,
Ice cold beer?
soft yellow lights, ice cold beer. Yeah, I don't know what those are actually called, but they're like show lights or like marquee lights or something. And so people were driving by, Vietnamese were driving by, and then they were U-turning and coming in, and like there's so many things we didn't address. Like your Vietnamese, to my knowledge, was quite good. You're definitely on some level of fluency, and you were like just heralding people in. And what were some of the things? Did you have some funny conversations with people? Like what were you saying to them? What were they saying to you?
So I think it was quite an unusual sight for a lot of the people that were driving past to see in the middle of nowhere this beer truck just parked and a lot of people standing around drinking beer. So they were driving in, and Vietnamese people are very curious, and they were just kind of checking it out, what's going on here. And I think that's a great opportunity for us to... Most of them, the first thing they said was, like, what are you doing? So I would explain, we have a beer truck. Today's the first day, and do you want a beer? And they would say, well, how much? And I say, it's free. Come on, let me get you a beer. And I try not to take no for an answer, and I try to really drag them on over. And a lot of them did. A lot of them came over and had a beer. And I think, they were still a little bit shocked and didn't really know what was going on because it's not the everyday thing.
If that would have happened to me when I was like 20 years old and I'm driving by a dead-end street and there's a truck and a guy waving me over and
Here's free beer.
and says, what are you doing? And he's like, we have a beer truck. You want a free beer? I would have probably thought I died and went to heaven.
I mean, part of the fun of beer craft is bringing beer to people who've never experienced it before. I think some of the people that came that day had never had craft beer before. I think there was a family with. I think the girl was maybe 15 or 16. I did see her drinking beer, but I think her dad was giving her the beer. I just think it's a really good experience for people to have, and we are in such a fortunate position that we can give away free beer, and we can for us it's all about creating moments, and that's what that day was about. And for people who didn't know about us, didn't know anything about craft beer, who driving along, to kind of be sidetracked for 15 or 30 minutes out of their day and be able to tell that story later that night to their family about, hey, on my way home I pulled into this side street, as you do, and
Some crazy foreigner made me have free beer.
That's kind of.
He could speak Vietnamese.
Yeah, that's what we do. That's what we love doing.
You're such a comfortable person to be around. You're really a joy to talk to. Thank you so much for doing this with us.
Yeah, it was fun. Really fun.
Yeah,
Thanks
thanks so much. And cheers, by the way. Thanks,
Cheers.
Mark, for the beer.
Cheers.